Welcome back, fellow Zelda enthusiasts, to another episode of Hyrule Comparisons. Today we're touring one of the most underrated and overshadowed locations on the map. But it shouldn't be. It's home to Hateno and Kakariko Villages, the Dueling Peaks, and so much more. Nestled between Lanayru and Faron, Necluda is so vast it's broken into eastern and western territories. But together they're no bigger than Lanayru, which we've already covered, so we're going to do the full tour of Necluda in one go. In Breath of the Wild, West Necluda is covered entirely by the Dueling Peaks Tower, but in Tears of the Kingdom it's split between the Sahasra Slope and Popla Foothills towers, while East Necluda is split in both games between the Hateno and Faron towers in Breath of the Wild and the Mount Lanayru and Rabella Wetlands tower in Tears. The route for this tour will start at Kakariko Village because it's up at the top of western Necluda on the border of Lanayru, and then we'll systematically work our way down and through the Dueling Peaks, head into East Necluda, and continue until we get to the Necluda Sea. So with that said, let's go. Kicking things off, where in Breath of the Wild we found the Talo Nag Shrine, in Tears we find the Zonai survey team has built scaffolding around this area to reach the giant fallen skyrocks all over town. Down the path from here is a pretty cool swap. At the site of the Great Fairy Fountain just outside Kakariko in Breath of the Wild, we now find the East Hill Chasm. Also, just outside the city limits in Breath of the Wild is the Lakna Roki Shrine, but only after completing a few prerequisite quests and bringing an orb over to the pedestal. This area is completely insignificant in Tears. Heading west from this shrine brings us to the entrance of the Kakariko Village cave at the top of a waterfall, where we find the source of the waterfall is a spring that's equally as mysterious. And in the Bubble Frog room, there's a platform we're meant to ascend from, which spits us right back out at the chasm. At the south end of town is the Kakariko Village well, which did not exist in Breath of the Wild, but is now tucked between a Kuko coop and a small tree. There are what appear, but may not necessarily 100% be, bloodstains smeared across the walls, perhaps a reference to the bottom of the well in Kakariko Village in Ocarina of Time. Making it to the end of the cave is a relief, as you'll find a secret garden and possibly the little girl who tends to it, as opposed to a gloom spawn. Ascending from here puts us up on the hillside next to a single silent princess, which was not present in Breath of the Wild, and just a little farther over from here is the third and final device dispenser we'll encounter throughout this series. Heading up the hill is the Kuko Hideaway, a place where Kukos gather for regular meetings. Then, a bit northwest of here, heading towards downtown Kakariko, in Tears is the Makasura Shrine. Now, obviously, one of the main changes with Kakariko is the sheer number and size of the sky debris that's fallen around this area. The ring ruins in particular are worth mentioning because it's become a significant landmark, and one which helps progress the story. As we drop into town, and now I've reported on this before in my useless information series, but one of the first things I wanted to compare was the placemats in the front of the shops, because in Breath of the Wild most of them were mirrored for some reason. It's just a mistake. They're supposed to say welcome in Hylian text, but they're printed backwards. This has since been fixed for Tears. Dorian's house has been remodeled, and by remodeled I mean destroyed by one of the skyrocks. And there's been some more scaffolding built around it, so it's partially repurposed as the Zonai Survey team base. The road leading out of here to the northwest has had some work done to it, completing in the center where it wasn't connected going down the slope. So now it runs all the way down Sahasra, past the border into Lanayru. Along the way, we eventually make it to the Marok Shrine, which is elevated on a hovering skyrock and sort of guarded by a gloom spawn. Heading way down south and off the beaten path from here, going back up the hill, we make it to the Sahasra Slope Skyview Tower and its corresponding cave, which goes through and through if you break enough rocks. What would be the south entry is marked by ore deposits in Breath of the Wild. West of here, on a tiny island in Nabi Lake, we have our first of many double Korok spots of the tour. In Breath of the Wild, you'd lift a rock, and in Tears of the Kingdom, you jump from where that rock was to dive through a circle in the water. And then another double Korok spot in this river just north under the Aegis Bridge. In Breath of the Wild, you lift another rock, and in Tears of the Kingdom, a cork to uncork where that rock used to be. Let's keep the double Koroks rolling by circling around the island to the Owlin Bridge. Again underneath, in Breath of the Wild you shoot a hanging acorn, and this time Tears of the Kingdom is the one where you have a rock to lift. Moving onto the island from here, on the shore of Batera Lake, on top of a Zonai pillar, there used to be a treasure chest with 5 bomb arrows inside, where now is yet another Korok. Then across Batera Lake from here, there's now a Dragon Tier geoglyph for memory number 4, the Gerudo Assault. The one where Ganondorf and his Gerudo army sends an attack of Molduga towards the Great Plateau, and Rauru, Sonia, and Zelda pull together to decimate them. Also on this island, although not in the same place, it seems to have migrated north a tiny bit, which makes sense. There was a standard stone talus, which is now upgraded to a battle talus. Guess he just got up and walked away. On the southern end of this island is the South Nabi Lake Well. It has some gloom around it, which as you drop down you'll discover is because it actually is an entrance to the depths, making it, as far as I know, the only well that does this. I have no idea why it isn't marked as a chasm, but it does make it interesting. It's funny to think, like, who would have guessed while playing Breath of the Wild that this unassuming piece of overworld decor would become an access point to one of the biggest additions to the sequel. Anyway, moving along south of here over the Squabble River and circling counterclockwise around the Deya Lake, we get 4 more double Korok spots. First, there's a boulder in the forest that needs to be pushed into a large hole in Breath of the Wild, and in Tears the boulder's already in the hole, so you must take it out and place it on the little stand that's where the boulder originally was, next to it. A pretty cute little change-up of the original puzzle. Then, while standing on this little ledge on the hills of Bomber, the pinwheel that used to spawn had 3 balloons we needed to shoot. Now where the pinwheel was, there's a dandelion you need to catch before it touches the ground. Continuing around the lake, there was a Korok behind these 2 little statues kind of under this large tree, and in Tears of the Kingdom, these 2 statues now have an offering plate where you must offer an apple to one of them. This was also a memory recovery location in Breath of the Wild for number 11, Shelter from the Storm, the one where Link practices his swordsmanship in the rain while Zelda questions him about upholding his destiny while she questions her ability to hold up hers. And finally, the 4th double Korok spot of this area is just offshore the Deya Lake inside a gigantic hollowed out log. You lift the rock in Breath of the Wild and catch the fairy lights running around inside in Tears. Moving on to a little piece of dry land in the middle of this lake, you'll encounter another gloom spawn in Tears if you haven't already, because there are 3 lurking around. But anyway, over here is a well. In Breath of the Wild, it was a ball and chain Korok puzzle, but now it's the Deya Village Ruins well, which is special. It's the only well I've come across so far of the total 58 that has a shrine to find down inside, the Sasub. So now we've found 2 special wells in Necluda, one that acts as a chasm, and one that acts more like a cave. North of here is the appropriately named Deya Village Ruins North Well, which does connect to the original if you blow some rock inside. In Breath of the Wild, this one also exists, and it's filled with sneaky river snails. East of this sub-shrine is the Deya Village Ruins East Well, which is also filled with river snails in Breath of the Wild, but in Tears of the Kingdom has Zonai blocking the opening. And down inside it also connects to the hub, making for a network of connecting wells. The Deya Village Ruins South Well also connects to the hub, but you're blocked and cut off by a big metal gate. In Breath of the Wild, this one had a treasure chest inside with an opal. And well, would you believe there's another one just southwest of here named the Hills of Bomber Well? Well, you better. This one has a bombable rock in the center, and when destroyed will play the "you solved the puzzle" sound and flood a little bit, revealing a wooden chest with a ruby inside. And directly west is the Hills of Bomber Chasm, where a Korok used to live. Just east of Deya Lake, we find the Popla Foothills Skyview Tower. In Breath of the Wild, there are burned ruins in this spot with a fire wizrobe flying around, making it my primary suspect in this arson case. In front of the tower is the Popla Foothills North Well, where we find an NPC trapped in the little prison, but we can't free them unless we head south and enter through the Popla Foothills excavation site cave. Some of the walls in here look blood-stained like the walls down that Kakariko well, so it stands to argue these are either actual bloodstains from torture chambers or it's some other substance. Just outside the excavation site entry is the Popla Foothills South Well, another well where Chef Ari Temu, aka the Lonely Cook, has been before us, and in Breath of the Wild there's another treasure chest inside with a soldier's spear. Moving northeast towards the Dueling Peaks, in Tears of the Kingdom, we find the Joshiyu Shrine, but only after completing the Keys Born of Water shrine quest in some Zonai ruins. Crossing back over the Squabble River in Breath of the Wild, we find the Dueling Peaks Tower, an empty place in Tears of the Kingdom. And from here leads us to the Dueling Peaks themselves. We'll start with the South Peak. About halfway up used to be a Stone Talus Jr., who doesn't look like no junior to me, but his dad is on the other side, by the way. Now a blue Hinox hangs out here. Then there's the South Cave on the other side, which used to be marked by an ore deposit. Inside is a puzzle to get Tingle Shirt, but the solution can only be found in the North Cave, which we'll see in a moment. At the summit of the South Peak, we have a shrine swap and a double Korok spot. There used to be the Shi Veneer Shrine, but now there's a fallen Skyrock and Zonai devices where the shrine was, and then there are a couple offering statues for the Korok, but now there's a platform to stand on between them, which spawns a mark to paraglide down to in front of where the shrine used to be. And I should also mention the climate change at the top. It used to be cold enough to require a level 1 protection of some kind, but temperatures are warmer up here after the upheaval, so make of that what you will. The North Peak, as I mentioned a moment ago, has its own cave to explore where the solution to the South Cave is painted on the ceiling, making for a cool reference to the shrines on each of the peaks from Breath of the Wild that required you to match opposite puzzle patterns. Then there are 3 more double Korok spots around here. On the north end, in Breath of the Wild, you drop another apple into a statue's offering bowl, while in Tears of the Kingdom, you hit the dandelion to catch it again. On the east end, you'll roll a big boulder down a hill between 2 trees, and in Tears of the Kingdom, you stand next to a pinwheel under one of those trees and shoot 3 balloons circling around the other. And it's worth mentioning there are still 2 boulders up on the hill in Tears of the Kingdom, although they're not meant to be rolled between those 2 trees, rather they're more useful for rolling at the nearby enemy camp, which was not established in Breath of the Wild. And the third is at the summit where there used to be a rock to lift, now another pinwheel that spawns balloons you need to shoot. Directly under here is where the Shi Vinath Shrine is in Breath of the Wild. It's been swapped with a Korok block puzzle, and dropping back down almost all the way to the base of the peak to where the Ri Dahi Shrine was found on a short cliff is now a rock to lift with a single green rupee underneath. Heading to the east side of the North Peak is the Esho Shrine in Tears of the Kingdom, which is the counterpart to the Ha Da Mer Shrine in Breath of the Wild. Both are the convenient warp points for getting to the Dueling Peaks stable, and while there's nothing where the Zonai Shrine eventually will be, there is a Korok puzzle where the Sheikah Shrine originally was. Of course, the stable has a well we can explore, even though it didn't exist in Breath of the Wild. It's one of the coolest and most unique I've seen yet. A triple layer well within a well within a well. Apparently, the big secret here is that at the bottom layer has a bunch of fairies. But since I already had 90 plus, the game said I had enough and didn't spawn them in. So by now, if nothing else, Necluda is the land of cool wells. Speaking of fairies though, south of the stable there's now a great fairy fountain at the end of the road. This road dead ends into nothing in Breath of the Wild, so it's a thoughtful place to put something useful. And I'm telling you, this comparison video is becoming more of a double Korok report than any before it, because deep in the Bobinga forest, we have yet another. This time, it's a pinwheel spawning balloons in Breath of the Wild, and another dandelion to catch in Tears. What's fun about this one is that solving it in both games reveals the same exact Korok has been living here throughout the years. They're both left-handed, flying, red-bodied, heart-shaped faces, aka potato. Straight north of here in the Ash Swamp, where in Breath of the Wild we had another memory to recover, number 17, Zelda's Awakening, the one where Link collapses near death and Zelda finally realizes her sealing powers and uses them to power down the guardians within her blast radius. We now find Addison trying to set up one of Hudson's signs here in the rock that guardian, which was about to laser them both to death, was crawling over. Now I'm sure he'll be fine. North of here is Lake Celia, where along the cliffside on the edges, there's a ledge where you can jump down through some lily pads below to get a Korok, but now where you jump from off that ledge is a rock to lift. One of the more common Korok puzzle swaps we've found so far. From here you can see the entry to the Byroad Lanayru Wetlands cave, which I mentioned in the Lanayru comparison. It'll go through and puts us in that region. On the western shore of Lake Celia, we have yet another Hinox sleeping where a stone talus used to lie. Somewhat interesting to see this type of enemy swap twice so close to one another, not to mention in other videos like the Akala comparison. And the bridge spanning Lake Celia is Kakariko Bridge, which the road leading out of town to the east takes us and passes the tree where we first find Hestu. Although I already spoke with him here while filming the bit for my useless information series, but a bit farther up the hill is where we help save his maracas from the 3 Boko thieves off to the side, where we now find one of the Stable Trotters band members needs help making a honey crepe for the maestro. And dropping down the side of the cliff from here, we have yet another double Korok location. There used to be a Korok hiding at the top of the tallest evergreen. Now one runs around between the trees he must catch. Directly south of here is Fort Hateno, and the Fort Hateno cave, where the most significant find is the bubble frog for its gem. On top of the wall of Fort Hateno is more double Korok action. There used to be a pinwheel that would spawn jumping acorns in the distance, but now all you have to do is lift a rock. And it should be noted, this area was once littered with dead guardians, and now monsters have turned it into an enemy stronghold, but they're a bunch of chumps. Heading northeast up the road and then taking a left off the trail are a couple of things. First, another double Korok puzzle swap. Originally, an apple needed to be offered to one of the statues here, and now there's a stump on the ceiling between these two statues you must ascend through. Then, right where this area dead ends, the Kam Erg shrine would rise after shooting the cursed statue with an arrow. In the cliffside directly behind where the shrine would appear, now is the Robred Drop-Off Cave, which is complex to say the least, but if you explore it well enough, you'll eventually discover the Barbarian Helm. And moving this trip way down south from here to Oakley's Navel, we have another double Korok spot that used to be a ring to dive through is now a rock to lift, exactly like we saw a bit ago. And right on the shore of Oakley's Navel was once a couple of ore deposits, where now is the entry to a cave that runs deep into the southwest and eventually leads to the Tokoi Shrine, which needs a crystal brought to it. Heading east, we quickly make our way to the Maida Mountain Chasm. Northeast from here is the Hateno Tower in Breath of the Wild. There seems to be a marking on the Tears of the Kingdom map in its former location of what looks like a rock ring Korok puzzle, but when you actually get there, there's only a bunch of wildflowers. Then in Breath of the Wild, the ground is obviously extremely disturbed from the tower protruding up from beneath the surface, where it's much more flattened out in Tears. Hopping down and crossing the Fur River brings us to 2 more double Korok spots and a double treasure location. The treasure chest is inside the cabin and used to be centered against the back wall containing 10 arrows. Someone has since pushed it into the corner and now it contains the Phrenic bow, so they kinda go together, bow and arrows. The first double Korok spot here is a unique puzzle in Breath of the Wild where you shoot 10 targets around the looping path and then shoot the balloon above the cabin. In Tears of the Kingdom, you only have to climb up to the top of the cabin and examine the fairy lights, and if you go walking around the looping path, you'll eventually run into a gloom spawn. The other doubled Korok spot is at the top of a nearby hill inside some ruins where there used to be a rock under a big metal door you needed to stasis out of the way, but now the Korok runs freely and you just have to catch the fairy lights. Even farther south are more double Korok spots around what used to be the Three Brothers Hinox Shrine quest. First, there used to be a ring to dive through where now is a cork that requires uncorking. Directly west of here, where the youngest kin Hinox slept, is now a Stalnox, sleeping permanently. Well, sort of. Then more westward, another double Korok just past Mount Turan next to this big tree was a rock to lift that's been swapped with a pinwheel that spawns balloons. The Rabella Wetlands of this area, where the oldest kin Hinox was sleeping on a chest containing a gold rupee, is now the Rabella Wetlands Skyview Tower. And slightly south is the Courage Step, where offering statues next to the tree used to reveal a Korok, but now you must catch the fairy lights circling around that tree and the statues are gone, which usually doesn't happen. Most of the time, as we've seen throughout this series, between the games the statues have usually remained and only the bowls are removed. East of here in the Uten Marsh was the Middlekin Hinox, where there's no significant swap exactly where the Hinox was. It makes me feel bad for that middle child. Then of course on the hill where you'd bring the orbs from around these Hinox's necks, the Tawa Jin Shrine would rise up. Now another bunch of flowers marks the spot, and the little altar that set off the shrine quest is long gone. East of here is the entry to the Mount Dunsel cave, which contains the Bamitak shrine and runs through and through to the other side of Cape Kale. Both would-be entries are marked by ore deposits, and waiting to greet you just outside the north entry zone in Breath of the Wild used to be a Hinox, now is a stone talus. And if you ascend from the underground shrine, you'll find another patch of flowers on the surface in both games. Not to mention some bokoblins on horseback. Up on Cape Kale, right about in the middle, is a giant stone skull enemy fort that's in much worse condition than it was during the Calamity, as many of them are in Tears of the Kingdom. There were 4 lookouts, now there are only 2, and funny enough, someone somehow managed to balance a boulder on top of the skull, convenient for rolling on top of their poorly placed explosives, but a circle bomb back in the day would get the job done just fine too. The treasure for defeating the camp was a soldier's spear, now it's a royal halberd, so basically a spear upgrade chest. And at the tip of Cape Kale, where there used to be the Muo Jin Shrine, has become a patch of dirt and somewhat rustic garden-looking piece of scenery, which we can see was always there when the shrine marked the spot. But with the shrine absent, it looks like a Zen garden, and I actually love it. I really do. Jumping down and heading north along the cliffside coast is the Cape Kale Cliff Face Cave, which strangely requires a whistle to open the stone door for entry. Directly to the left, where you'd expect to find the treasure, are some bright caps instead, and the treasure is on the pirate ship because the monsters stole it. Inside the chest are Tingle's tights. The last remaining piece of Tingle's set is in the 8th heroine statue as we saw it during the Gerudo Highlands comparison. Now we can start traveling back north, and we'll head to the summit of Ebon Mountain, where near the broken-hearted lover's pond, a cherry blossom tree has sprouted up. And if we head directly north from here, down the mountainside, we immediately make it to what used to be Link's house in Hateno Village. This is now referred to as Zelda's house, although evidence does show they lived together. And when you haven't bought up the house yet in Breath of the Wild, it's under demolition by Bolson Construction Company. We can, of course, explore down the well to find Zelda's diary and Link's old ponytail. Across the way from the front yard, you used to be able to spot the horned statue, which is no longer there as it's moved to the secret hideout under Lookout Landing. Heading into downtown Hateno, besides the mushroom festivities and all that, the main change we find is the newly built Hateno School. This used to be one of Mayor Reed's scarecrow patches, nothing more. The school itself is made of the same materials you can build your dream house with out near Terrytown. Right next to this spot was the old blue flame furnace, which is completely gone, unlike the Akala one where the structure still exists but the furnace has been removed. Then we have access to 4 more Hateno wells, north, east, south, and west. They all 4 combine underground to form a tunnel system beneath the village, just like we saw with the Deya Village ruins wells. However, unlike those wells, none of these existed in Breath of the Wild. But where the Hateno Village South well is placed, the Mayhem Agana Shrine used to be. And where the Zonai Zanmik Shrine is now, there used to be a big tree on the hillside. Heading even farther east of here, up the road to the ancient tech lab, we find a cave going through and through called the Retsam Forest Cave. Off to one side, you'll find the Mayasik Shrine inside, and exiting out that upper opening puts us higher up on the road, right next to the ancient tech lab. Again, just like in Akala, the furnace out front is missing. On top of the tech lab itself is the same decayed Guardian, one of the few bits of unused Sheikah technology that remains. And with it comes an identical Korok puzzle, where in both games you can examine the fairy lights on top of the Guardian to get a seed. You may have also noticed the giant telescope is missing in Tears, and the decorative frog above the doorway is missing its glasses and umbrella. Inside the tech lab is still messy, but Robbie rearranged, putting the ancient robot assistant Cherry on Purra's old workbench rather than in the corner where the pedestal used to be. He also removed the Sheikah decor down the side of the wall for some reason. East of Hateno, just on the other side of this water, is the Walnut Mountain Cave, where we get the barbarian leg wraps as seen in my Lanayru tour because it tunnels all the way through to that region again. And a quick little interesting change that doesn't mean very much, at the end of the road heading south out of Hateno is that the road has been extended a little bit to reach all the way to the shore of Kitano Bay. There's no real obvious reason for this, it just is, so I wanted to mention it. Northeast of here we find the Deepback Bay Cave in Tears. Inside we find the Anna Demimic Shrine. In Breath of the Wild, where the cave entry would eventually be, we find another Korok seed where you place a palm fruit in an empty basket in front of one of the offering statues. East of the cave entry, there's a double Korok spot on top of the hill. In Breath of the Wild, there's a pinwheel that spawns 3 balloon targets, and in Tears of the Kingdom, where the pinwheel was, is now a rock you need to lift. Heading all the way to the eastern edge of the map from here, we find the Mapla Point Cave. Inside is a trapped NPC whose life you save for 100 rupee reward, and if you ascend from where you saved him, you'll end up right on the last double Korok spot we just went over. And so now we can head out into the middle of the Necluda Sea. We'll make our way to Tanoko Island, which used to be home of the Chaz Kata Shrine. There used to be a single regular sail raft here, now there are 3 of those whale-shaped boats usually found in Lurlin Village. Then there's a tiny unnamed island next to this main island for one final double Korok spot. A little platform used to spawn a ring of lights on the island you'd have to race to. Now there's a bottled up little guy you must uncork to free where the light ring was. Well, I hope you enjoyed my tour of Necluda. Make sure to dislike the video and unsubscribe to make sure you catch the next tour when it comes out. Did I miss anything interesting in this one? Let me know. I'll be back as soon as I can with more content. I believe Faron will be the next region we do, so until next time, stay cool and always keep punching out there. Aloha.